on Notre Dame's campus where the Fighting Irish practiced for the fourth time during this spring slate, which will culminate with the Blue Gold game on April 12th. We only saw the first 4 periods, which are 5 minutes in length each. So that's 20 minutes, and then we were also there for about 10 to 15 minutes of stretching. So the usual half hour or so where we get to watch these guys who just went to the national championship game a few months ago get ready and try to get back there at the end of the 2025 season. Jack, a lot of going on with the offensive line right now. I was watching the offense, but we got to talk to Joe Rudolph, and you spent a lot of time with him. We got to talk to some offensive linemen as well. I want to start with Charles Jagasaw and a quote that Joe Rudolph had about him that was pretty strong, pretty telling quote. What do you say?
Yeah, well, you've seen Jagasaw observing the offense line up at guard for pretty much all of the spring practice that we've seen so far, which hasn't been a ton, but he's been all at guard. Joe Rudolph was asked about that, and he said, yeah, you watch the tape against Penn State when Jagasaw is kicking butt at guard out there. He's like, oh, this could be one of the best guards in the country. And Jagasaw started the national championship at left tackle because Anthony Knapp was hurt, and that was the best 5. The best 5 may well include Jagasaw at guard and kind of figuring out the tackle spots because Joe Rudolph believes Jagasaw could legitimately be one of the best guards in the country. That was what really stood out. Other stuff that stood out we heard on the offensive line, like Kirby Lambert is obviously getting a ton of reps at both left and right tackle. Emil Wagner, we saw on the bike earlier today. He's not practicing too much just because he played 990, I think was the exact total snaps last year. Another offensive lineman who's kind of standing out that I asked Rudolph about, and Bryce Young kind of talked about as a tackle who's been standing out. Styles Prescott, a guy who was hurt. He had shoulder surgery, last year, but he's a guy who's really flashed. And man, I both envy and do not envy Joe Rudolph right now because he's going to have some tough decisions to make, but they're going to be tough because Notre Dame has more than 5 good offensive linemen that they're going to have to decide who to start.
Here's the thing about Jagasaw playing guard. Yeah, he looked really good at guard in that Orange Bowl, so you kind of want to funnel into that. Is basically what Rudolph was saying is like, hey, if we got a guy that looks as good as maybe anyone in the country at one particular position, why would we not keep him there? And we've seen that with Rudolph over the years where Emil Wagner looks better at right tackle than he does at left tackle. So let's keep him at right tackle. Well, you don't have to move him over to the left just to kind of make everyone happy and get the puzzle pieces to fit. If a puzzle piece only has one shape, right? Like leave it where it fits is basically what Rudolph does. Here's the thing, though. With Anthony Knapp not partaking in spring practices, you really thought, okay, Charles Jagasaw needs to play left tackle because he's the best option there. No, you bring up Styles Prescott, and he's played a lot of left tackle in this spring session from what I've seen in the couple times that we've been out there. So not saying he's going to be a starter, obviously, but he's a guy. And you know who another guy is, Jack, who Joe Rudolph was talking about today? Sullivan Absher can do a lot. He was playing center a little bit today, taking some snaps. And then, of course, I think he is going to be a really good guard, and that's exactly what Joe Rudolph said, too. He's a guy who's going to play a lot of football at Notre Dame throughout the course of his career. So, yeah, like you said, tying that all together, a lot going on with the offensive line. A lot going on with the defensive line, though, too.
One more offensive line note. One more note on Anthony Knapp. Something Rudolph said about him. Obviously, he's not practicing too much with that ankle right now, but Rudolph said, coming in, he was someone that they thought would end up at guard or maybe even center. But last year when he was coming up and kind of practicing in spring and fall camp, they were pleasantly surprised with how much of a natural he was on the outside at tackle. So Knapp might have a better chance to really keep that left tackle job that we've been giving him credit for. Again, there's a lot to figure out. It'd be tough to put Knapp back to the bench in my opinion. And Rudolph saying he's got the length. He might have a weird body type for tackle. He's a little on the shorter end for a tackle. I think he's 6'3", 6'4", but he's got the length. And he's a guy who Notre Dame could actually see sticking there in the future.
Yeah, and that's another reason why Charles Jagasaw is not all in on left tackle, right? Notre Dame thinks that it has enough at left tackle to where Jagasaw could play guard. Switching over to the defensive side of things, defensive line, I want to start there. Jason Onye was just lauded and praised and everything by Al Washington when we got to talk to him after practice today. Basically, it's really sounding like Al Washington has taken a liking to Jason Onye, just some of the personal stuff that he went through. Washington went so far as to say, hey, this guy has helped me in my own life because I see his personal struggle, and I'm like, how can I better my life in the way that he had to? Jason Onye really had to better his life to get to a point to where he's still playing football for University of Notre Dame, and Al Washington was like, that's a guy that I want in the foxhole with me. That's a guy who might be starting for Notre Dame at tackle this year is what Washington said. Of course, you have so many other options there, from Donovan Hines to Gabriel Rubio to the two transfers that came in Jared Dawson and Elijah Hughes. I know you've been watching the defensive side of the ball. Can't really tell much with the defensive line because I know they even go outside and you're stuck inside. But some of the things that Al Washington said about this group, do you think it's headed in the right direction?
Yeah, I think it is. I really like the edge rushers, assuming Jordan Botello, who I think you talked to a little bit today. Jordan Botello and Boo Cartrera are healthy. I think they got a lot of depth and some potential star power. Bryce Young, a couple guys. Emil Wagner said like Bryce Young can be an All-American here, and like he's obviously not the first one in the program who said that. So you gotta love what you see from him. Josh Burnham's a guy Washington talked about a bit, like a versatile dude. He can play both defensive end and Viper, which is huge given the injuries they had last year. I think that flexibility really helped them get to the national championship because he was a really good edge setter in the run game. Probably not going to play too much on passing downs, but they like him and they trust him in the run game. So I like this group. They have a lot to again, both sides of the ball. I think this is going to be a story we're going to write this week on blueandgold.com. Like they have a lot to figure out, but it's mostly good things. Like you might have some questions about the defensive tackle room, but like at edge rusher and offensive line, you don't know who's going to start, but you know they're probably going to be pretty good.
Burying the lead a little bit here, let's get to what we saw in practice. No, I'm not going to give you any juicy nuggets on the quarterbacks because we basically just saw them throwing to each other. Not much to glean there. Offensive side of the ball, it was Jeremiyah Love. It's deja vu. He's repping with the wide receivers again in the periods that we saw him. So quarterbacks are handing off to running backs. Jeremiyah Love is not there. He's working as a slot receiver with Mike Brown and those guys. It really seemed like Brown was pouring into him a little bit more than maybe the others. So, like, Love was going at the end of the slot receivers during that rotation, and he ran the route, and Brown said, nope, let's go and do it again. So, again, I say deja vu because this is what happened last year, and we didn't see a whole lot of Jeremiyah Love playing wide receiver. Why would we? He's one of the best running backs in college football. But if this is an effort to maybe get him more involved in the passing game, I think he averaged, a catch and a half. Definitely not two.
122.
I think it was 28 actually.
28, yeah.
28 in 16 games. Yeah. Not a whole lot. Maybe you can get that over the 2 mark. Maybe 3 to 5. Then you're talking about a guy who's doing it all, legitimately doing it all for the Notre Dame offense. So that's probably what that is all about. Otherwise, from the offense, I guess I'll give you this juicy nugget, if you will. Who goes first in these lineups in terms of individual drills and routes on air and stuff doesn't matter a whole lot. But when you see Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison as the slot and the field, respectively, you're like, okay, those are your top 2 options right now. Cam Williams was repping at the boundary. So for all you people out there that want to say, hey, how is he coming along? He's getting his looks, he's getting his reps, and maybe he's making those progressions. So that's what I saw from the offense, Jack. I know you wanted to talk about the secondary and maybe even the linebackers from the defense.
One quick note on Love, actually, before I get into that. We talked to Jawan Sider last week. He said that Love is like as good as anyone he's ever seen at running back, at running routes. And I think you saw the result when they got Aeneas Williams matched up on a linebacker, like split out wide against a man-heavy defense. Notre Dame saw Penn State was playing a lot of man in the Orange Bowl. They split Aeneas Williams out. This was a game plan for in the second half. They split Aeneas Williams out wide on a linebacker. He beats him up the field. Dime drop by Riley Leonard, 36-yard gain. I think they think they can do a lot of that with Jeremiyah Love, both in running routes out of the backfield and in the receiver room. I don't think they used him as a receiver, not as a receiver, but as a pass catcher enough, quite frankly, last year. And I like that. I like that they're experimenting with this again right now. On defense, we kind of got to look at where the back 7 depth chart stands. Not a lot of huge surprises. Jalen Snead repping with the ones alongside Drake Bowen. That's a seniority thing. Of course, I think a lot of us expect Kingston Viliamoasa to get to move ahead of him this spring. We believe, as does the team, that he has star potential. He was repping with the 2s alongside Jaden Osbury. The 3s at linebacker is actually kind of interesting. It was Madden Faremo and Teddy Rizak in that third duo with Preston Zinner and Bodie Cahoon with the 4s. Faremo's gotten a lot of hype. I don't think Rizak's gotten enough. I think he's someone that they like a lot in that building. He's a good athlete. Might not be ready to contribute a lot on defense next year, but I think down the line, when some of these other linebackers like Snead, Osbury move on from the program, like he's a guy who could help a lot at Rover. I think he's going to be a special team stud this year, Rizak. Another guy I think is going to be a special team stud and could help on defense is Tay Johnson, was repping with the 2s at safety. He's a guy who, like, it's not quite as glaring as the Adon Schuler glow up that we saw last year, where he goes from like, oh, he's a skinny freshman to, oh my God, that's a football player out there. especially in the lower half, I think you see a lot of that in Tay Johnson. He looks like a lot stronger and just more natural out there than he did. Like he was like a skinny, gangly freshman. He looks a lot more like a football player out there. He's going to help this team in some capacity. I don't know if it's going to be at safety, at nickel, or just on special teams, but he's going to help this team in some capacity next year. Ben Minnick is another guy I wanted to note. He was repping a drill with Devontae Smith, which indicates that I think the Notre Dame wants to try to salvage something out of him at nickel. I don't think he's a factor in that safety room, Ben Minnick, but I think Notre Dame's going to try to see what he can do at nickel.
Interesting notes there on the defense, and obviously we talked a lot about the offense as well. That'll do it from us today from Notre Dame's 4th spring practice. Next time we see you guys in this capacity, I believe, will be a couple Saturdays from now where we get to see an entire practice. So definitely stay tuned for that. April 5th is the date. And then, like I said at the beginning of all this, April 12th is that spring game where everything kind of comes to a close. A whirlwind of a spring, Jack, but we're doing our best to cover it at blueandgold.com. Again, I'm Tyler Horka. That's Jack Sobel, blueandgold.com, Blue and Gold Illustrated.